This is November the 19th, 2023. We welcome you to Congregational Church of the Valley. We hope that in maybe some unexpected way that you might be blessed by what we proclaim this day. The sermon is entitled, The Paradox of Generosity. Before we receive that message, go with me and we'll gather around the piano as we hear the marvelous music of Larry Loeber.
Our scripture reading today starts with 2 Corinthians, the 9th chapter, starting with the 7th verse. Each of you must give as you have made up your mind, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful, hilarious giver. And God is able to provide you with every blessing in abundance, so that by always having enough of everything, you may share abundantly in every good work. As it is written, he scatters abroad, he gives to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way for your great generosity, which will produce thanksgiving to God through us. For the rendering of this ministry not only supplies the needs of the saints, but also overflows with many thanksgivings to God. Through the testing of this ministry, you glorify God by your obedience to the confession of the gospel of Christ, and by the generosity of your sharing with them and with all others, while they long for you and pray for you because of the surpassing grace of God that he has given you. Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. And now Hebrews, the 12th chapter, starting with the first verse. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured. Amen.
What do you think of when I say the word paradox? Paradox, in its simplest form, is something that sounds contradictory but is not. Generosity is such a paradox. Every source of advice in our society tells me, with everything on media, every sign that I see on the highway tells me, Dick, you need to get more of what you have enough of. Go get it. Can't live without it. Maybe we're suffering from the, I'll call it the Costco effect. You know, I need a little bottle of Cholula. That's the hot stuff, you know. I love that stuff. You know, so, but when I go to Costco to get a little bottle of Cholula, I discovered that they only make it in the large bottle, and it's got a plastic thing around it, is that I've got to get 2 of the large bottles, no little bottle. So maybe what we have in our society is what we call the Costco effect. We need far more of the stuff than what we could ever realize. First hearing of the word generosity makes me respond this way. If I am generous, especially in the way that the biblical text instructs, I will have less, and I don't want to have less. And matter of fact, let me argue just a little bit. You know, I don't want my kids to be dependent on me in some particular way. If I really gave away that much, you know, maybe I'd have to move in with them. And boy, that could be Dante's vision of hell, but I won't, you know, tell you what that would be, me bringing hell to them. You know, oh, we don't want that. So we are stuck in this mode that, man, I've got to have enough. And what does it mean to have enough? Rockefeller was asked one time, how much money is enough? And he said, just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. The second hearing of the word generosity reveals a deep truth that is there hidden in generosity. The deep truth that is there is that, hey, Dick, you want something really important out of life? You will receive far more than what you give away. And that's true. Just ask people, some of the great givers that you know. I get far more out of it. So hear this biblical truth. What we keep to ourselves, we lose. What we give away for the good of others is what we have forever. A paradox. Yes, it is. John Ortberg quotes from the book, The Paradox of Generosity, a survey by Christian Smith from Notre Dame. He's a sociologist. He talked to 2,000 people, and he asked, what does generosity do for people? What does it do for them? And the summary was this: generosity is paradoxical. Those who give receive back in turn. By spending ourselves for others and their well-being, we enhance our own standing. In letting go of some of what we own, we better secure our own lives. By giving ourselves away, we ourselves move toward flourishing. This is not just a philosophical or religious teaching or argument from Moses, or from the Buddha, or from Jesus or Muhammad. This is sociologically a fact. I saw this thing recently on television. I can't remember exactly where it was. And it was an amazing story. They spent a lot of time on it. There was a woman whose husband died, and she was in deep grief, sitting at home in tears week after week after week. She got in her car one day, and she went to a fast food place, and so she was in that line that we've all been in, going through a fast food place. And she came up there, and there was a big truck in front of her that went on ahead. And then she came to the window, and the lady leaned over and said, I just need to let you know yours has been paid for by the man in the truck. She said, really? Yeah, the man paid for it. Right there, it's all taken care of. And she was curious. And so she sped out of there, and she tracked him down and was able to wave at him, wave him over, and there they were together. And he said, well, this is just something that I do. Now, the further story was, he's a workman on buildings, and he gives half his money away by just simply doing what he did with that woman. And she said, for some reason, it touched my heart so deeply that I began to feel the first sense of healing from the loss of my husband. And so she started to spend time with him. And they got to talking about the things that, kind of the random acts of kindness that they could do along the way. And so now both of them, they're go into stores or all kinds of places. And they showed one time where she's in a store there, and this gal says, oh yeah, I really want this, but I can't afford it. And she would just come up to her and says, well, I'm going to buy that for you. If you want that, I'm going to buy it for you today. And of course the person is surprised and all that kind of stuff. The two of them do this with half their income and spend a lot of time together in outrageously joyous moments together. I want to buy that for you. You know, right now in our church, sometimes things are going on that we don't even see. There's a part of myself that wants to totally honor Clint and Sandy. They were called by a pastor in the state of Maine, a lot of UCC churches back there, and told about a couple that was coming to Arizona, and she has cancer and she needs some kind of care, and they don't know that they'd be here for a month or so, and asked if she possibly could find somebody to take them in. And Sandy, the ultimate hostess of the church, said, well, they can stay at our place. And so Clint and Sandy had this couple come to their home, and then the rest of us got to meet that couple in the back pew there at the church, and we met her and got to chat with her and she got her treatment. They went back to Maine, and after her treatment and going back to Maine, in time she in fact did pass away. And then recently, it was Clint and Sandy, they went to look him up in Maine, just to see how he is doing. I'm just going to tell you, this is right under our eyes in a very small church. Never are we more like God than when we do the things that Clint and Sandy did. And I certainly honor them for that. My main point today then is our well-being is dependent not on what we get, but what we give. Somebody has identified the 5 measures of well-being. I'm going to talk about 2 of them, but I'll just give them all to you here. Happiness, I'll talk about that in a moment. And the second is bodily health. As somebody says, certainly in my age group now, if you have your health, you have everything. The third thing that they talk about is purpose in living. We'll talk about that also. And then the fourth is avoidance of depression. And we know there are 2 kinds of depression, as I understand it. This is overly simplified. If somebody's spouse dies and they're very sad and depressed, that's understandable, of course. But there are some people that experience chemical depression that is hard to chase and cure. Sometimes medication can help. But I'm here to tell you, I have met dozens of people in ministry where even medications could not reach them. Some of it ended in suicide, others in just mass sadness and loneliness. So there's a fifth thing here, and that is interest in personal growth. Now I want to spend time with just two of these. Let's talk about that happiness thing, okay? Happiness is never found when we are seeking it directly. Never. Happiness is always a byproduct of giving yourself to something that matters. I remember sometimes just crying over a newspaper when I saw a refugee family and what was happening with them, leaving one country, trying to get into another. And I remember that terrible, terrible scene that I will never get out of my mind of a 2-year-old infant lying face down on the shore who drowned along with his parents and everyone else. I'll never forget it. Jim Wallace said that we must welcome the stranger. Thomas Merton said God comes to us in Scripture, inside ourselves, and in the face of the stranger. A Christian is anyone that imitates the Spirit of Jesus. Many who call themselves by the name of Christ have taken that seriously, and they lead us into a whole new arena. I was in Columbus, Ohio for 23 years. And I had, one of the most active groups was what they called the Refugee Task Force. They were a task force about 20 years previously, and they just kept meeting together. And every month, they would walk in with a refugee family that they were sponsoring. They'd take care of the furniture and get them in an apartment and all this kind of stuff, work with the government agencies and the local agencies. And if you remember all of the hideous stuff that was happening in Bosnia-Herzegovina, I can remember that, and they said, we need to get a family here that needs to come here. And I remember them bringing this couple through the line, and the sister of the woman was with her. She's just a beautiful woman, and they announced to me, just as if you'd say, please pass the butter, they just said, now you do know, her husband was murdered in her presence in the Bosnia-Herzegovina war. Just hideous. And they went away, and these people were settled. A lot of times they would find their own faith communities. Otherwise, we didn't say that they had to come to the church there and all. And I remember one time walking through a store, and there was a woman who came and tugged at my sleeve, and she said, Dr. Wing, do you remember me? And I turned on around, I said, okay, I think I've seen you at our church. I said, remind me again. She says, I was the one whose husband was killed, and I came here with my sister. And you got us going, and actually you saved our lives by paying our rent and helping us with food until we got our feet on the ground. I love that bunch of, crazy, wild people who couldn't wait to get to church and introduce us to a family they were sponsoring, a refugee family. So the main point about happiness is never found when seeking it directly, and neither is success. Viktor Frankl talks about this in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. It was later talked about a people's search for meaning. It is always success and happiness, a byproduct of the best things that we can give to people in tough times. Those times are here for many people in the world right now, and it is our privilege to give ourselves for their shelter and their well-being. Well-being was that list that I gave you, and I'm looking at just two of them, and the second one was purpose in living. I'm clear about this in my own retirement, working part-time at the church, one must have a purpose in life. I could remember, this was so good. My wife, who's the most delightful, sweet, kind personality, as we looked 2 years in the future at my retirement, she came to me one day and she said, you know, I got to thinking that in retirement, I think it might be a good idea for you to leave the house at least 8 hours a day. Isn't that the sweetest thing you ever heard? And she said it so sweetly, just so sweetly. And it is no joke. There are many, particularly men, who identify themselves with their particular job and their position and whatever, that retiring can really be a crisis of purpose. Some people roll into retirement just real easily and say, oh, the best day at the office is the day I left it. And with others, still they struggle. So, retirement can be a crisis, but they need to bring in the Chinese symbol that crisis is disaster, and it is also opportunity. And maybe that would be a good word for many to contemplate. I remember when I was in San Diego, there was a woman attending church. Her husband never came. I'd never met him or anything else. She said, hey, Dick, I want you to know that my husband just turned 68 and he's retiring today, and we're going to have a little bit of champagne there at our house. Would you like to come on over? And, you know, free champagne, of course, any minister I know is going to be there. And so I go there, and I was introduced to him for the first time, and it's great. He told me all about his job and how long he'd been with the company. I think like 35, 38 years, something like that. And so we went and had a little bit of party time, and then she called me the next day at noon. And she said, Dick, we're glad that you came last night, but my husband was lying in his easy chair this morning, and he died. He died. And we could do all kinds of projections that we might want, but there was something in him that most likely thought, you know, I'm done with life because I'm only evaluated, I only have value to the degree that I'm producing something in this. What was going on in his head? I don't know. But it seems like there was nothing left for him, is what she told me as we planned for the funeral. Someone said a long time ago, all of us need something to do, someone to love, and something to hope for. And even in that love, if there's not a spouse or another person there, in terms of love, then it's find that cause and love that cause like you never have before. I leave you with two stories that have to do with the subject of the paradox of generosity. I heard the story about some people in the hill country in West Virginia that were snowed in. Big snow came like they haven't had in a long time, and there was a family that they knew was up on a mountain, very poor, and having a tough time in it. And they were all snowed in. There was knowledge of them being there, all snowed in. So the Red Cross goes out there with their helicopter, and then finally they find this house. They see some smoke coming out of the smokestack, and so they are finally able to find a place to land, and they know that she's going to be thrilled. This single woman with her kids, they're going to be thrilled to see them there. And so they came up to the door, and they went and knocked on the door and said, "Hello, ma'am, we're here. We're here from the Red Cross." She hesitated for a moment. She said, "Guys, it's been a pretty tough year, and I just don't think we're going to be able to give this time around." I remember a woman in our church who got the annual letter for a pledge, and she called me and she was crying. She's crying. Her husband had left her. She had 3 kids. And she said, here I have been among the better givers, and now I have nothing. And I tried not to skip a beat, but I said, well, shoot, you got the wrong letter. I said, you got the wrong letter. That's not the letter we should have been sending you. If I had known what had happened to you, and how bad things were, I would have given you a different letter that says, hey, how can we help? And so I went to see her, and we paid her rent for 6 months. We got her food, and did this all quietly without anybody knowing about it. She got back on her feet, is doing fine. And sometimes we need to be very much aware of those who, like that woman rescued by the Red Cross, they want to give, and the worst thing that can ever happen to them is not giving. I remember in a Southern Baptist church one time, there was a woman who was very poor. Everybody knew it in the neighborhood. And the deacons of the church, in wanting to be kind to this woman, called her up and let her know that the $1 she's been giving every week, she doesn't need to do that anymore. And that's when she cried. And she said, you just took away my last ounce of dignity. So what needs to be told to people in that situation is that your desire to give when you can't is pleasing to God, and we honor that in this congregation and in this church. My next story is about a man who is losing everything. This was back in the late 1920s. Made a lot of money on the stock market. Somebody got a hold of him somehow, and in the midst of all of his wealth in 1928, they talked him out of enough money to build a university in Africa. Now, money goes a long way in different places in the world, and this went a long way. He built a university. And then came the crash of 1929. And he was devastated. He lost everything. And time went by. They got into the 1940s, and it was a time to celebrate like 20 years anniversary. And they went looking for the guy who'd put the money up, and they couldn't find him. Finally, they found him in the south part of Chicago, in a very poor and dilapidated place. And they came to him and said, hey, listen, it was long ago you gave the money to this university, and they'd like to honor you at this anniversary time. And so they were able to get some money and pay for a ticket to get him to Africa for this celebration. And he's sitting there next to the president of that university. And he's looking at all the celebration and all of the thanks that is coming his way. And he said, isn't it strange? What I kept, I lost. What I gave right now is what I have. So CCOV, we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. So let us remember the paradox of generosity. What we keep, we lose. What we give is what we have. Not only now, but forever. Amen.
Will you pray with me? Eternal God, we come to praise you for we praise you most for the beauty of this day. We know that your touch is everywhere in creation, and yet you touch everything so lightly that you leave no verifiable fingerprints. In 1,000 ways, your mysterious presence makes all the difference. And for that, we forget to give you praise and thanks. And so in this brief moment in time, we do thank you and praise you. In the middle of all this praise is a weight upon our hearts, a stone too great for us to move alone. Come move the stone of untimely death, of nagging illness, of abandoned dreams and impoverished spirit. Come move the stone of paralyzing fear and the void made by preoccupation. Electronically, we have moved information about everything closer, and at the same time have allowed ourselves to drift further from the quiet places where you have promised to meet us. Come move the stone of our getting more of what we have enough of our seeking self above service, of seeking status instead of sacrifice. Come move the stone that blocks our view of our mortality, that we may glimpse with bold imagination your quiet and powerful presence that declares at our last breath, "Behold, I make all things new." Lift us now by the power of the living Christ, who is the light of the world. Fill our minds with his peace and our hearts with his love, for we pray these things in the name of the one who came and taught disciples. And so we pray the same by saying, "Our Father who is in heaven, holy be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen."
And now may the peace of God that passes all of our understanding keep your hearts and your lives in the bond of his love and his will. Amen.